Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time studio. We are delighted here on the morning of May 21st, 2021, to have with us in the studio a very special guest, Adam Griffin of the Institute for Justice. Rather than do any injustice to his biography, I'm going to let him tell us a bit about himself. Adam, welcome to the show. And please enlighten our listeners as to who you are and what you're all about.
Thank you for having me on, Christopher. I really appreciate it. I'm an attorney at the Institute for Justice. We are the national law firm for liberty. It's really the best place in the world to work. I sue the government for a living.
Oh, so envious.
A great way to spend a day. So like I said, IJ, the Institute for Justice, the national law firm for liberty, we sue the government. We ask courts to strike down unconstitutional restrictions on people's rights that prevent them from living the American dream that they're pursuing. And we do this in 4 core areas: economic liberty, free speech, school choice, and property rights. And we've been incredibly successful in our work. We've had 9 Supreme Court cases at the US Supreme Court, and we've won 7 of those cases. And we sue state, local, and federal governments across the country to protect these rights for individuals.
Is it fair to say that if state and federal legislatures did their jobs appropriately, meaning within the bounds of the constitutions by which they are supposed to be constrained, that the IJ itself would have no need for existence?
It is true that if government did not abuse people's rights, that you wouldn't need a place like IJ. Unfortunately, we see governments abusing people's rights so frequently that there is a need for a place like IJ. And hopefully we're so successful that there isn't a need for this kind of work. But as long as there is, we'll be here to defend people's rights.
Excellent. Sounds like a better motto for the Avengers. So, well, with that, let's dive into some particulars, because a lot of our listeners and a lot of people who are, busy, as you say, trying to live the American dream and grappling with all the difficulties of raising children and going to jobs and being held back from jobs in certain states because tin pot dictator governors have decided they know what's better for you than you do. Luckily, living here in the free state of Florida, we've been remarkably free of this sort of nonsense, but that has plagued a vast majority of the states over the last 18 months or so. So what are you focused on right now? What is the thing that wakes you up in the morning and says, gosh, this is the bit that I get to sue the government about, and gosh, I'm happy to do it?
Yeah, well, one of the things that's been getting me out of bed and exciting me every day is a case we just launched in Tarpon Springs, Florida, on behalf of 2 food truck entrepreneurs, Elijah and Ashley Durham. And like you said, Elijah and Ashley Durham, they're ordinary people. They have children. They're trying to take care of them. And they opened a food truck when Elijah lost his job during this pandemic. The pandemic's been hard on the food service industry. Yep. He lost his job, and they were trying to figure out, what are they going to do for a living to feed their family? And they decided they would open a food truck. And that food truck they called Soul Burger. And the idea was that they would make delicious burgers, but they would make them very quickly. And he would take his gourmet chef experience of over 30 years in the food industry to make these delicious burgers. They did it from all locally sourced products, and they were incredibly successful. They had a local agreement with a brewery that was working really well for them. They were serving customers there. It was going great. They thought this was a great time to invest in a food truck because Florida had passed a new economic liberty law,
right?
That among other things prohibited cities from banning food trucks outright. And they thought that food trucks are good for everybody. More jobs,
I would agree.
More foot traffic, better local economy. So everything was great until local businesses bristled at the competition. And they were not happy with food trucks coming into town and competing with their bottom line. So they lobbied City Hall in Tarpon Springs, and the local government passed an ordinance banning food trucks from the downtown area. But there was one convenient exception. They allowed local restaurants to operate a food truck.
Oh, how nice.
Right, exactly. So the local governments can have a food truck if they want to, but independently owned food trucks like Elijah and Ashley are kicked out of town. And the only reason for that is to protect local restaurants.
And all this is based on the flawed idea that the person who's about to stroll into a restaurant for a sit-down meal that is 45 minutes to an hour and a half to sit and chat is going to be heading towards that meal and go, oh, food truck, and then rob business from that restaurant. That's the idea of the restaurateurs who go pressure local government to ban this thing. Is that an accurate assessment?
Apparently, I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's just contrary to the evidence. Actually, studies that the Institute for Justice has done have shown that food trucks actually help local brick and mortar businesses because they bring more people downtown. They actually help local restaurants because they increase foot traffic down there. So it's based on a mistaken idea that food trucks hurt local restaurants when actually competition is better for everyone.
Right. Well, I mean, that's always a conflict, right? When you're dealing with perceived, if you're dealing with a perceived limited universe of potential customers, then by definition, every competitor is taking a slice out of a zero-sum pot. But if you're changing the dynamics of a local downtowning and making things more robust, and all of those sort of things are what, of course, your analysis is based on. I'm with you in that government shouldn't be stepping in the way of private economic freedom to begin with, right? They shouldn't be trying to pick winners and losers, especially in the restaurant business.
That's exactly right. Governments, they're not allowed to pick winners and losers in the marketplace. It's unconstitutional to do so.
They're not allowed to, and yet they do all day long.
They do all the time.
The export-import bank on down to Tarpon Springs City Council, apparently. So where does this currently stand? Are the entrepreneurs still out, dispersing burgers from the food truck while this court case proceeds forward? Have they been stymied and told they're not allowed to do anything? What's happening to them personally?
So they had this operating agreement with a local brewery, right? And they were operating there. Things were great. The brewery liked them. They liked the brewery. And in the middle of serving burgers to customers, city officials came down and said, "You got to close up shop." So they're in the middle of operating. Now, they didn't wait till after they closed. They didn't give them a call or no. In the middle of serving burgers, they came down and said, "You've got to close up." And
of course, hoping to give the impression to the customers who don't understand this that there's something wrong with the food truck, right? They didn't stop to explain to people, "Hi, we're a protectionist racket trying to protect restaurants downtown." They, of course, give the impression that this is being shut down for legitimate health reasons, which, of course, is damaging to their brand in the long term and long term, which is what the politicians hope for.
Exactly. And so it puts them in a bad situation it makes them look like they're the bad guys when they're not.
Right.
And so, but they've been operating outside of town. They've had to go to neighboring towns. They've actually, they had to double their costs because the travel expenses. Right. They bought a truck that was better suited for traveling in town. They had it all.
They've got a local brewery that has their own property that said they can park on their property. Mm-hmm. So it's not even like where they might get a little bit of sympathy. It's not even like they parked in the parking lot of the local diner who serves burgers and beer, and they're competing with them, which they can still be allowed to do in theory. But in this instance, it's completely ridiculous because the brewery is not serving burgers, and the brewery views their existence as complementary to and beneficial to their own business. Right. So you've got two businesses impacted because of crappy law written by a bunch of amateurs in the Tarpon City Council.
You're right. And that's a really important point. I mean, Elijah and Ashley here just want to operate on private property where they're invited by the private property owner.
Right. What a radical idea.
I know.
They sound like Che Guevara.
I know. It is crazy. And the Tarpon Springs, the local government prohibits private property owners from doing what they want on their own private property. And Elijah and Ashley have gotten invitations from other private property owners in Tarpon Springs, and they've had to decline it, saying, "Look, it's illegal for you to invite us to operate on your own property."
And how long has this abuse of their family been going on? And feel free to name the commissioners on the city council. We'll be happy to give them some free airtime.
So it has been going on since September of last year. So they started investing in June. What was that?
That's madness. So
I know.
Trying to destroy their livelihoods. Wow, how great. Must be wonderful to be a member of the Tarpon City Council. Sound like great people.
Right. And it's their own hometown. It's their hometown that they thought would embrace them with open arms. And when they are they've said when they operate in downtown Tarpon Springs, they make more money than they make in any of the neighboring cities because the people in Tarpon Springs are hungry for these food trucks. Sure. Like it's something that the people like, but the city government, because they think that only politically connected insiders are allowed to operate food trucks and compete, they lock these food trucks out of town.
So when did IJ get involved? When have you taken up the sword of justice against these clowns?
We just launched this case this week. We launched on Tuesday. We had our press conference on Tuesday, filed our complaint on Tuesday, and that's when we got rolling on it. We've been talking with them for a little while about getting this case together.
Right.
But Tuesday is when we officially served the city with our complaint and our lawsuit.
And what was their response? Does anyone ever rational take a look at the IG's track record and see the complaint and decide to convene a city council meeting and say, we thought this was a good idea, but on the evidence, look, we're damaging a local entrepreneur, and plenty of people have petitioned for them to be here, and sometimes we make mistakes, and we're reversing the ban. Does that ever happen? Do you think it's likely to happen here?
That does. It happens. We'll see how it goes. They have not made any comments yet, and we actually have tons of statements from local government officials from previous board meetings, and they're all in our complaint, where they say the only reason we're doing this is to protect local businesses. We've got to protect our local restaurants. We've gotten a lot of calls from local restaurants. We've got to do something to protect them. Well, we don't want to circumvent local restaurants' investments. We need to keep this competition down. So we have that all detailed in our complaint. I mean, the reason for this ban, right, the local city officials told us, was to protect local restaurants.
Right.
Whether they knew that was unconstitutional or not is another story. But
even though arguably this food truck is also a local restaurant.
It is. It's just a restaurant on wheels. I mean, and most entrepreneurs that start food trucks often go into starting brick and mortar restaurants.
Right. But I don't want to wander down the error of people who look at the outcomes and try to judge them, right? What we're talking about is a priori rights. In the market, the free market competition is the only system that has ever lifted up people in general, and stymieing it in any way is usually really bad news. And here's another example of it. So in large measure, it doesn't matter, certainly to me as a free market guy, and from a legal standpoint. So what? Businesses come and go all the time. Restaurants come and go all the time. You want to retain your customers, make a better product, give a better service. And as someone who eats out a lot, there's no way that if I'm thinking I'm going to go to a restaurant and sit down and eat, I don't, like squirrel, see a food truck and say, no, I'm going to sit outside and have a hot dog. I'm not doing that. If I'm going to go get a hot dog outside or from a taco truck, I'm doing that. And so I find the whole thing insane. I remember I used to have a office in Rockefeller Center before New York became such a socialist nightmare that I had to leave. In Midtown, like restaurants everywhere, and when we're taking customers out to eat, we go to the lovely Japanese place down the street on 57th Street and 6th Avenue and sit for 2 hours and spend a fortune. But when it was lunch at the desk, we had a competition between the bulgogi truck and the taco truck, and they were both phenomenal. So yeah, again, I'm arguing outcomes versus rights, but like the thinking seems very muddied at the Tarpon City Council that this was going to be a good idea. B, clearly they showed no remorse about destroying a family's business, right? Did that ever come up? Do they care in the slightest?
That family business called every board commission meeting and said, this will make it so much harder on us. Like it will keep us from operating downtown. It will destroy our contract with this brewery. It will double our costs. And apparently that fell on deaf ears.
And there's the Tarpon residents being made to feel very welcome in their hometown. Right, exactly. And there are other food trucks in town that have been kept out of the downtown area by this. So it's the same thing. So what do you think? I mean, you can't predict here. I mean, obviously the best outcome is the scenario we just discussed, that they'd be like, oh, you're right. That was a bad idea. Sorry. And they might just make that decision on the basis of their council telling them how much it's going to cost to go fight this, and their likelihood that it's probably going to get overturned. So are you going to go spend $200,000 fighting this and then lose? Why bother? Hopefully they get there. Well, we fought these food truck bans in other places. And I think, two cases that we've had previously are kind of instructive. We sued about a ban in Fort Pierce, Florida. There was a law that said you can't operate a food truck within 500 feet of a local restaurant. We sued there. The city fought back, and we got a court to say you can't enforce that restriction on food trucks. And they enjoined it, or told them they couldn't enforce it. And then the city backed down. Right. Then you have Carolina Beach, North Carolina, where the city actually just did a blanket ban, no food trucks in town anywhere. And that was to protect local restaurants. We came in, we sued, and the city said, yeah, you're right, this is wrong, and backed down. So we'll see if the city of Tarpon Springs decides to back down and let our clients operate, or if they decide to fight back. And if so,
we love to sue the government. And so we're can't guarantee anything, but we're confident that we could get a favorable ruling protecting our clients' economic liberty.
Well, good for you. On an a priori basis, anyone who's suing the government has got my blessings on a consistent basis, with no exception. And what's the other kind of stuff you're working on? I mean, you yourself are focused mainly on sort of economic liberty issues in the work you do. Is that a fair assessment of the 4 categories of stuff that IJ works on?
That's true. Economic liberty, and then also some property rights, but economic liberty is my primary focus. Another case that we recently just launched is in Long Island, New York, in the hamlet of Mattituck. And there's a local do-it-yourself hardware shop, a hardware store,
Yep.
Brinkmans Hardware, family business, mom and pop shop that now the children own it and operate it. And it's in 3 locations, and they're trying to open a 4th location in the hamlet of Mattituck. Vacant lot that they came to purchase. They buy the property and they're underway building this. They've been looking at this property for almost 10 years.
Right.
And then the city is like, well, we don't want this hardware store here. And so
Why?
this is
We don't want a citizen enabled to do home repair on their own? What was the rationale? What was the purported rationale, aside from the protectionism that lies behind it?
So it's not 100% clear. They just seem to not like the Brinkmans being there. There's another local hardware store in town that has been the hardware store in town for all these years.
And how large is the town of Mattituck?
I don't know the population number. It's a small little town in Long Island, though. It's not a large place.
Like one of your 8 to 10,000 people municipalities kind of thing.
Right. And they, the Brinkmans entered into a contract to buy this land. The city tried to interfere with the contract, called the bank that they were buying from and said, do not sell this property to them.
Even though this has been a vacant lot sitting somewhere in a town for 10 years.
For 10 years, 20, longer. I mean, I guess it's been a vacant lot forever.
Right.
And then after that, they tried to charge them $30,000 for a permit. They delayed their permitting. Then they passed a moratorium on building on a little strip of land in Mattituck, right with their hardware store in the middle.
Magically, right here, no more building.
Right, no more buildings here, moratorium, who knows why. And they issue exceptions for anybody else that wants to build in that area, except for the Brinkmans. So it's just really a ban on them.
And this can happen, of course, anywhere, right? But is this a personal issue, right? Is someone in town government, did they all go to high school together and Brinkman like beat him out at the prom and stole his girlfriend and now they're married happily? Like, what happened? Yeah, do you have any problem behind it?
I don't know, because they're a well-respected business throughout Long Island.
Right.
So they just don't want this hardware store there. And so then the Brinkmans sued in state court. This was before we got involved, and had the moratorium. They survived a motion to dismiss and to challenge the moratorium. And then the city tries to exercise eminent domain to take their property.
Well, that's fabulous.
That's when we got involved. And
because it's really important that we maintain this vacant strip.
Right. Well, they said they want the ostensible justification was we want a park there, but it's not a park. Like, we don't want to tear down the trees and build like, a baseball diamond or put benches in. It's a passive park.
Right. So we're going to put up a sign and change nothing that says this is now a park.
Exactly.
From vacant lot to municipal entertainment center with one stick.
Right. Exactly. A passive park, which is it's a sham. It's just a pretextual justification for keeping the Brinkmans out of town. And that's an unconstitutional use of eminent domain. And that's where we stepped in. We see this where governments just pick winners and losers, sometimes arbitrarily, sometimes because they don't like the person, sometimes because they want to protect somebody else. And that's just an unconstitutional use of government power.
My biggest fear as a private sector entrepreneur is that governments can make rulings based on whether they like you. It terrifies me. Right. It's ridiculous. So what do you so do you have any sense of, I'm sure you guys have, you have a long track record, very interesting track record. How long has the IJ been in existence?
We're coming up to our 30-year anniversary actually this fall.
Phenomenal.
1991.
Phenomenal. And I read the book by your founder about the 12 worst Supreme Court cases. What was the name?
Dirty Dozen, Chip Miller.
Right, the Dirty Dozen. Phenomenal. Everyone should go read that. It is just the most massive eye-opener. And especially as a lot of these rulings go back to the socialist in the wheelchair and his horrible idea of trying to pack the court as if this was something new for Democrats. And you just look at the economic damage that has been done over decades because of incredibly stupid legal rulings and really, I can only think ill-intentioned legislatures, much as, on a much bigger scale. Right here, the Brinkmans are spending, how much money they spent on this nonsense so far, right? They tried to buy a piece of land that was vacant. They've had to, they've been trying to hit with arbitrary permits, which sounds like a bill of attainder to me. And then they've been arguing. I mean, how much is this costing them so far?
Well over $200,000, I think, pushing towards $4. So I mean, that's just a ton of money to dump in there. And this battle's been going on since 2016, and
that's a total loss. That's not an investment in future productivity. That's just lost money fighting an arbitrary dictatorial government.
Right, exactly. So they're sapping a ton of economic power from a ton of economic productivity from entrepreneurs who just want to create a business for jobs and to serve the town. To do what? To keep a vacant lot there rather than to develop it with something beneficial. So it's just
is the owner of the other hardware store the mayor of the town?
He's not, but he's represented by the former town attorney.
Amazingly enough.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I wish the Brinkmans all the good luck with that. I'm tempted to make jokes about brinksmanship, but I'm sure that's just cheesy. You've already done that around the office. Are there any other things that are kind of really top of mind that people should be aware of? And I mean, including, how do they support the work you do? I mean, the people may not know at all. The Institute for Justice is completely funded by donations. It's not like you're suing for a percentage of returns the way a slip and fall lawyer does, right? How does the IJ operate?
Right, that's a great point. We are a 501c3. We're a charity law firm. We do everything pro bono. We don't charge our clients a dime, and we rely on the generous donations of a really fantastic donor base. And so you can go to ij.org, www.ij.org, and you can click on the donate tab, or you can click and you give us money, that kind of thing. If you support our work and think what we do is valuable. Most of our donors are just average Americans who donate $20, $40, that kind of thing, and that really funds the work we do. And because we think that these court victories, we defend Elijah and Ashley Durham, or we defend the Brinkmans, but it really is defending the liberties of everyone. When a court rules in our favor, we get a favorable court ruling. You mentioned the Dirty Dozen and all those terrible cases, right? So I mean, if we can get the opposite of the Dirty Dozen, right? Those kinds of court cases would be hugely protective for all Americans' individual liberty.
That's actually interesting. Has Chip thought of writing a follow-up, which is in sort of the Monty Python Life of Brian, always look on the bright side of life sort of song. Maybe there's the especially clean and delightful dozen where liberty is restored.
Right, that's the goal of IJ. He actually did write a second book, Bottleneckers, which is about a lot of IJ's cases taking on these kind of protectionist laws. Like one of the chapters is casket cartels, because we sue a lot of states that have these regulations on people who can sell caskets or sell funeral supplies just to protect funeral directors in the funeral industry. So that's just one chapter.
Talk about a high margin business. I got an insight into the funeral home business years ago. Margins to make a drug dealer blush, just phenomenal margins on that. Talk about painful, hitting people at their most vulnerable. Explaining that mom would really like the silk line casket with the, someone did was it Saturday Night Live? Someone did a great skit about that. Like, this casket's got like piped in music, right? Like, ridiculous. Anyway, we will certainly, plug you heavily in the description of the show, both on our podcast and on the YouTube channel, and count on a donation coming from us. We love the work you guys are doing.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, heaven knows when someone's going to decide they're tired of hearing what we have to say and pass a regulation that we can't say it. Apparently, Facebook and Google and others are already doing that kind of thing without government interference. So I'm sure that's another issue for another day. Anything else? Anything else that kind of like punch you that you would leave our listeners with, and what should get them excited and optimistic that there are indeed stalwart legal paladins out there fighting on behalf of justice for the American people versus all the parasites they see on TV and the slip and fall ads?
Well, Christopher, thank you for having us on. I really appreciate you bringing me on to talk about this. We are fighting the good fight and defending people's rights. There are a merry band of libertarian litigators up here that are suing the government every day to try and protect people's rights. And so if you ever run into if any of your listeners ever have a situation with a run-in with the government that's in any of our 4 areas, look us up online and get our contact information, and maybe there's something we can do to help. And hopefully we'll be making the world a better place, one court case at a time.
That's awesome. Since every level of government is abusing every American in myriad ways every day, remind us again, what are the 4 key areas people should be looking out for that IJ can help them get the government off their back from?
That's economic liberty, property rights, school choice, and the First Amendment. So those are our 4 primary areas.
Excellent. It's my favorite amendment. Well, thanks again, Adam, for coming on. And to all of our listeners, remember, save yourselves the brain pain. We at Messy Times throw ourselves in the grenade of fake news. We didn't have to do that today because we had an honest man on the show. And that was refreshing. So I didn't have to go through mental contortions to figure out what he was saying and tell you the truth. I could just let him say it. So Adam, thanks for coming on. And for everyone else, please turn off the news, burn your masks, and tune into Messy Times.
Thanks so much, Christopher. I appreciate you having me on.